Okay, so hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about expectations for Amity faculty who are working directly with students, demonstrators. Okay? And since it's unlikely any of my droplets will go electronic and put you at any risk, I'm going to take my mask off for this. It's important to really try and explain what we expect from people who are working with students. If we aren't explicit about what we expect, then we can hardly be disappointed with people not getting it or not responding to it. And of course, you know, all of you have a job description. But no matter how good the job description is, it's a piece of paper. And a piece of paper, you read it and, it's not as clear as it could be. So I want to take this time and explain in my own way what our expectations are of you. There's a lot of there's actually a lot of research on expectations. There was a great experiment, I think it's called the Rosenthal experiment, where teachers, first they did an IQ test of everybody in these classrooms, and so they knew what kids were kind of more apt than others. But they divided the kids pretty evenly, so they were about, you had some kids with higher IQs and lower IQs in two separate groups. But in one of the groups, they told the teachers, this group of kids is really gifted, so you can expect a lot of them. And what happened? Well, those kids scored 20 points higher in terms of academic achievement by the end of the year than the other group, which was exactly the same. So what does that tell us? It tells us that what the expectations are make a huge difference in terms of people's performance. Now, it changed the teachers' attitudes. Oh, I can really demand a lot of these kids because they're really, really smart. And it also changed the students' perception of themselves. It isn't that the teachers said, oh, you're so much smarter, but in subtle ways, body language, how much attention they gave them, they communicated to those kids that they were special. All right? And so what did you get? Got a big bump in performance. All right? So by stating what our expectations are of you, the faculty, your performance will go up because people reach and match those expectations. The other part of it is, as your expectations for yourself go up, your expectations for the students will go up, and they will get much more out of their experience at Amity. So there's a great quote, we only hit at what we aim for, so we might as well aim high. So what you're seeing now is a diagram. The diagram has several words on it. It has hospitality, environment, and teaching. And then in the center, there's this triangle. It's a circle and triangle diagram, which we use all the time. In the center says the Amity Teaching and Therapeutic Community. Then you'll see some little arrows poking in at this diagram. One says empathy, the other says enthusiasm, and the other one says contract compliance. So we're going to discuss these. And I'm sure, as you come to work at Amity, no one ever told you we're in the hospitality business. Okay? But we are. And I want to take some time with this because it's a real paradigm flip to go from I'm a drug counselor to I'm in the hospitality business. Hospitality, where does this word come from? It's a very old word. And we see it presently. We see it, of course, hotels talk about they're in the hospitality business, or restaurants are in the hospitality business. And then we have hospital, which we don't think as being hospitality in that way. But there's an interesting origin. When about 15 years ago, I took my grandchildren, we walked the Camino Santiago. And the Camino has been walked for, 1,200 years. I mean, it started in about 800. People started making this pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, where apparently the relics of St. James the Apostle were buried, interred. And along the way, the towns are all designed to serve pilgrims. And the word hospital in Spanish is commonly used because that was, and what was an hospital? An hospital was a place of refuge where the weary pilgrim could get a meal and sleep in safety, because of course there were robbers and bandits who would prey upon the pilgrims because they had to carry money with them on this long journey. And so hospitality really has this ancient meaning of welcoming. It's friendly. It means you're welcoming somebody. Your behavior toward your guest is, I'm so glad you're here. And, synonyms for are welcome, warmth, kindness, friendliness. And I've always said I want everybody who comes to Amity, no matter whether they're coming into one of our prison campuses or whether they're coming into any of our residential campuses or other projects that we have, the attitude should be, thank God you're here. We built this place for you. We've been waiting for you to come, and we're going to make this a really good experience for you. And you're going to get what you need, and you're going to get the experience you need to really transform your life. Okay? I think everybody who comes to Amity, that should be our goal, that they feel this warmth, this friendliness, and this welcome. And hospitality doesn't stop as they walk in the door. Hospitality should continue throughout their stay at Amity. And there's so much that happens for people when they feel welcomed, when they feel like we're really glad you're here, and they're treated that way. All of a sudden you can let down your guard. You can stop, am I going to get, who's coming after me, and can I trust anybody? That warmth and that welcoming is just a melting of the armor that we carry around day to day because we're anxious about people and don't trust people. And of course, the people who come to us primarily are people who've really had a lot of really bad experiences. And the fact that they don't trust people is not really their fault. It is, so hospitality and you, what does that mean in terms of our expectations for you as a demonstrator, as a faculty member working with our students? First, it means a really good interview. There's no substitute for a good, fairly lengthy, comprehensive interview. And we have a lot of materials out for how to do that. I'm not going to try and replicate those, but we have other videotapes and written material on how to do what is a good interview. And if you don't know, ask. But it's very critical that that's part of the first step in hospitality is a really good interview. People being welcomed by faculty and students who are appropriate for that interview, and really spending some time to get to know that person. And particularly now when we're in the middle of this pandemic, when some people have to go from the the interview to quarantine, it's really important that they are really greeted warmly initially, and that we follow up on them in that quarantine period, which is pretty tough. So hospitality, knowing the names of your students is really important. You should know their names. You should know something about their family. You should know their social background. The social atom is a great thing to use for your own thinking in terms of, do I really kind of know the people that are really important to this person? And then, of course, what are the key events in their lives? If you ask me, or if I ask you, tell me the 3 most important things in your life, within you'll have to think about it for a few minutes, but you'll come up with 2 or 3 things that were really tipping points in your life, change points, where you really kind of had a fairly major shift in your life. For some people, it may be being incarcerated. For other people, it may have been a parent or somebody who's very close to them that they cared about a lot who died. A car accident. There can be many different versions of that, but everybody will have 2 or 3 things. You should know what those are, because that's a key to that person. And of course, as they're in our campuses, what room are they in? Who are they rooming with? And do they know other members of the community as they come in? They might have some prior connections. That's pretty important to know. You need to check on them and their living situation frequently. Make sure they have what they need. I remember so much. This was years and years and years ago in Synanon. This guy Jimmy Middleton came in, and Jimmy Middleton was a big, stocky guy. He was Native American and Irish, I think. He had been the instigator of the Joliet prison riots back in the 50s. He was a tough guy, with kind of a big bullet head. He didn't look like a guy you'd want to get on the wrong side of. And he came into Synanon, and at that time, everybody lived in this huge dorm with bunk beds. And he said, and because of the fire code, they had to leave the windows open. And they were right on in Santa Monica, kind of on the beach. And it's foggy and cold in the morning, particularly during the wintertime. And he said, somebody put down a little scrap of carpet, probably 10 or 12 inches long and about that wide, so that when he got out of the top bunk in the morning, his feet touched the carpet instead of the very cold floor. And he said, that kept me there the first week. Just that little gesture of humanity and care. So many little things make a difference in people's lives to make them feel you're welcome, we care, we noticed you. Okay? So also people in their living situations, most of them have never lived they don't know how to put an environment together that's pleasant, clean, and well organized. And that's part of our job, is teach them how to do that and help them with it. Not blame them because they don't know, okay, but teach them and help them. Okay, so that's hospitality. Now we're going to talk about environment. So environment, this is a quote. It is an unimpeachable truth that physical environment plays a predominant role in determining the behavior of individuals and groups. Okay, so we know this. The kind of environment we are in changes our perceptions, tells us kind of how to behave and what the expectations are for us. Buckminster Fuller who loved words, said many years ago, he started using the term the epigenetic landscape. And it's a great term. You change the outer environment and it changes you, and then you interact with the outer environment. So there's this wonderful kind of dialectic or dynamic between you as a individual conscious being and the environment that you're in. Now, some of that environment is the physical environment. That's what we're talking about right now. It's also the social environment. So that's the hospitality, and some of that is the, are elements of the social environment. George DeLeon, who has been to Amity many times and is considered the absolute greatest living expert on therapeutic communities, said to us not so long ago at one of the conferences that he was attending, the physical environment is the very first and one of the most important therapeutic interventions. So as you come into an environment, if it looks like an environment that you failed in or been unsuccessful in, or if the environment looks like a prison or a jail or a real institutional, you immediately go into that, oh, okay, I know how to behave in this environment. If you come into an environment that's really quite different than you've been in before, but it's thoughtfully set up. The colors are interesting. The pictures on the wall or sculptures or whatever have elements of your culture in them. It was interesting. I was in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, and we were having a meeting with some of the students there, and this one guy, I've been a gang member for since I've been a kid. I've done 20 years in prison, and and he said, I came to Amity, and the first room I was in, I saw things from my culture. He was Hispanic. And I saw some things on the wall, and it made me so comfortable. I felt like, oh, okay, I can do this. I can be here. Okay, so the environment is a very strong element. So now the environment and you. What are our expectations? Well, we want students to enter an environment that is culturally diverse, interesting, aesthetically pleasing, clean, well organized, and well maintained. Okay, I come into a room and I see a broken chair. That's not a good environment. I come in and I see all the chairs lined up stadium style. That's not a good environment. Okay, because we want to do circles. Circles are inclusive. And they also tell everybody in the circle, you're equally important. We want to hear from you. So the new student in the environment, he's looking, what's the message? And our responsibility is to make sure the message is consistent with our mission. Okay? So it is a responsibility of all faculty to maintain or restore the standards, our standards in terms of the physical environment. Now, I will confess that I did not start my career as being any good at this at all. I mean, I was, that was just not part of what I learned as a child. I wasn't very conscious of it, and I didn't really think very much about the physical environment at all. In any deep way or in the way that I'm describing it to you today. I had to learn that. So some of you have a knack for this. We have some people at Amity who, even as students, just had a knack, an eye for the physical environment. Then we had the rest of us, okay, who had a lot of learning to do. But you can learn this. This is not like learning ancient Greek or playing Go. I mean, this is within the realm of possibilities for all of you, and it must be, because what happens if we have faculty who don't learn this, then the few that do learn it are tearing their hair out and frustrated and all the time trying to pick up for those of us who don't know it and don't do it. So it's everybody's responsibility to take responsibility for the physical environment and to learn. In many cases, you don't have to learn much. You just have to look and see the way it is and make sure it stays that way. Okay? That's the advantage. We're not asking all of you to become interior decorators. But we are asking you to learn about this and to think about it and to make sure that we maintain the standards that our folks have developed over the years that are really, in some ways, almost a signature for Amity. We've had people come from all over the world in different walks and walk in and say, well, this is different, and I like it. We had a senator who came down to Rainmaker Hall, and he said, who's your decorator? And could you decorate my office? It's like, okay. It's like, Naya, Robin, okay. In terms of the social environment, what is the social environment? Well, faculty, it's your relationship with each other. I've been in situations where the students say, I know these folks don't like each other, and it's pretty obvious. In meetings and just the way they are in their work relation, there's cliques, there's people who really don't like each other, there's people who won't listen and respect each other. Well, okay, you guys are the first circle of the community. And if you don't form community and you act like a bunch of high school kids with cliques, the rest of the community can't come together. So you're in the way of community building. So why do we continue to have circles with faculty? So we can kind of work out our differences, say what we got to say in the circle and leave it there, and then go out and really be cooperative and work together with enthusiasm. Critical, absolutely critical. This is an expectation. I tell people, if you can't get along with other people here, you're working in the wrong place, because it's a critical part of building a community. Ceremonies are really important. And again, I have to say, ceremonies, which are so important in terms of pulling the community together, acknowledging accomplishments, special events, teaching, in many ways, the vision and values of the community. These are really, really important. And again, I have to say, did I come to my career, and now over 50 years, streaming, glory in terms of my ability to do ceremonies? Not at all. But I had some really great teachers who I watched like a hawk, like, how did they do that? And why did they do that? And eventually, over a period of time, it didn't happen all overnight or anything like that, I got better at it. I'm still not nearly as good as the people who are great at it, but I'm good enough where I can help in a community where if the person who's great isn't around, I can be good enough to do one that is very satisfying for the people in it and meaningful and done thoughtfully and well. All of you need to get there, okay? So watch and learn and read and listen, but that's definitely one of the expectations that we have of you. Okay, now we're going to talk about something which seems very obvious. Teaching. Okay, we call Amity a teaching and therapeutic communities. It's very interesting when George DeLeon was talking about kind of therapeutic communities over this almost now 60 years since they were initiated. He said, in many ways, some of the therapeutic communities are very vital and doing really well. Many of them have, the vitality seems to be significantly reduced. They're not as vital, they're not as good at helping people transform their lives as they were initially. And he said they stopped teaching. Okay? They've stopped teaching. They're not really teaching anymore. They're managing people getting them from one place to another, putting the check marks in the contract compliance box. But the teaching has diminished significantly. And maybe it's because people think, well, I'm a drug counselor. I'm not a teacher. Again, hospitality, you're in the hospitality business. Physical environment, you are in the physical environment business. You have to be. And you are definitely, you need to change your narrative about yourself. You are a teacher. And you can be a mediocre teacher or a good teacher. We want you to be we want you to be a good teacher. So what is education? Education is teaching, training, storytelling, ceremony, discussions, and personal demonstration. You know, the best teacher is credible because they're living their teaching. So the word teach arises from an old English word, which I hope I'm pronouncing right, called teikon, meaning to show, to point out, or to demonstrate. And the most powerful form of teaching, of course, as we just said, is personal demonstration. So teaching and you, here we go with the expectation thing again. You are a teacher. Teachers come prepared to make the day, the week, the month challenging, interesting, exciting for the students. They don't just show up. They come with a plan. Many cases that plan changes during, but they have a plan. You need to have a plan in place. You need to be prepared. You need to have the room or other settings ready. You need to have the materials. And you need to engage with the students. It means listening as well as talking. And when I say you need to have the materials, you need to be familiar with the materials. You're going to show somebody a videotape as part of a seminar. Well, you had better seen it yourself and really taken some notes on it and be prepared to really discuss it. You can't just come in and turn it on and hope for the best. And good teaching is good teaching. Whether it's a third grader or whether it's somebody who's 45 who's come to Amity. But why do we call them students? Because we're not medical doctors. We're not treating them. We're educating them. We're educating them through personal demonstration, through our own stories, through the materials that we have. And Amity has a very rich array of materials for teaching, which some of you have experienced and maybe some of you haven't, but you will. So you need skill and preparation in setting up circles, hosting circles. We don't use facilitating. You're hosting a circle. Doing seminars, doing gatherings, and conducting ceremonies. These are all part of you being a teacher at Amity. To be effective, you have to know your students well. We're going to keep saying this over and over because that's the first expectation, that you know each and every student under your wing, so to speak, well. And don't let grass grow under your feet. Your skills should improve incrementally during your entire career. I've certainly learned, I can't think of a year that I've been involved in this, over 50 years, where I have not had to learn something new and practice it and be embarrassed because I wasn't very good at it at the beginning. But it's just perseverance. Okay, so we've hit the three things on our diagram. We've hit hospitality, okay, we've hit environment, and we've hit teaching. Okay? Now let's talk about those little arrows coming in. One of them is empathy. Well, what is empathy? We use the term a lot, but what is it really? The action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to and experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another person, either past or present, without that person necessarily being explicitly telling you what's going on. There's a lot of other ways of saying it. Role reversing, that cliche. You don't know my story until you've walked in my shoes for a mile, okay? These are all ways of saying this ability to be with another person and to really understand what they're thinking and what they're feeling is a skill. And it's not necessarily a skill. Some people, again, like all the other things we've talked about, some people are so good at it, it's just amazing. I always, Kid and I will sit down on an airplane with somebody she's never met before, and within the first hour, they've told her things they've never told anybody else in their life. Okay, she has that apparently is something that she was born with, or she's, of course, spent a lot of time developing. And I don't have that. That didn't come to me naturally. I had to work like a galley slave to improve my ability to really be sensitive to people. First, to slow down and actually listen. Okay? But in our line of work, this is the pearl without price. People who are not, and it's something you can develop. I mean, you don't have to think because it doesn't come to you that way. You didn't come from the factory that way. It doesn't mean you can develop this. You can develop it by practicing it, and by persevering. This is so fundamental that I tell people, if you're unwilling to become an empathetic person, you're in the wrong profession. Okay? It's absolutely that critical. And again, you don't have to be the best in the West as you start, but you've got to get good at it. It's just absolutely critical. Students must know, not just as a mass of them, the entire group, students must know individually that we really care about them and their lives and what happens to them. We got to care about each and every person who we have that kind of a relationship with. You have a circle, you maybe got 10 or 6, 10, 15 people in it. Each one of those individuals has to know that you care about them. That is an expectation, and it's something that we must require of you because it's so critical for the work, And I've over the years I've heard so many people say, people loved me even though I was completely unlovable until I began to see some of the good qualities in myself that those people saw in me. That's it in terms of, and honestly, it's really interesting. They've done some studies, counselor studies, who had the PhD, how many, advanced degrees they had on their walls, and, who were the most effective in terms of the outcomes for the students or the clients, that they're meeting. That the most significant factor was somebody who really cared about that student, and that student felt, or client, or whatever they were called in that setting, really felt that that person cared about them deeply, personally, and wanted the very best for them, and was willing to really extend themselves to that person. It wasn't race, it wasn't education, it wasn't what gender they were, it wasn't what ethnic background they were. That was the key factor. Enthusiasm. We've got it right in the philosophy. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm, right? So it comes from the Greek. This is a really old word, much older than hospitality. It comes from the Greek entheos. Entheos is literally the God within. Okay? So the Greeks said when somebody was enthusiastic, it meant this passion, came out of them and was just explosive, So people are inspired, they're passionate, they're excited, and that's the kind of person you want to be around and learn from. I was listening to a recent author, and he said something that just struck me. He said, enthusiasm is worth an additional 25 IQ points. Okay. Now, I don't think, the science has really got it down to that granular level, but it's a great way of saying it, that a teacher who is competent and duller than dishwater versus somebody who is maybe not as competent but is wildly excited about the subject and really enthusiastic and is really interested in you learning it, man, that's golden, okay? And so when you come to work, put on your, find the God within and bring your enthusiastic self. Leave your boring, dull self at the door and bring our students your best, your passion, your enthusiasm, your excitement for what you're doing and what you're teaching and who you are and who they are. Okay, now, after talking about passion and excitement, contract compliance. Well, look, the reality is that we have a contract which specifies that we do certain things. Most of those things are not the things that transform people's lives, but they're things that we have to do nonetheless. I always say clinical files are important, but no one's ever transformed their lives as a result of their clinical file. They've transformed their life because of the other things we were talking about, the hospitality, the enthusiasm, the person really feeling like I'm known and somebody really cares about me. Those are the things that, the environment you're in, these are the things that really transform people's lives. But we still have to have good clinical paperwork. And actually, good clinical paperwork is helpful because it keeps you reminding yourself of who this person is and how they're changing. And all of us, unless you have a photographic memory, it's helpful to keep these kinds of notes. There are other things, reports, so forth and so on, certain standards that are in our contracts or are given to us because we have a license to operate and we have to do certain things. So you should read and understand the contract so you understand what those expectations are. This is the equivalent of, when you're in Rome, you have to pay Caesar in Roman coins, no matter what whatever currency you would prefer to deal in. So that's the basic. That's not the most exciting part of this job. In fact, it's oftentimes dull, uninteresting, and oftentimes seems irrelevant to the task at hand, but it is nonetheless a requirement, and you're responsible for knowing it and adhering to it. So you also know that all of you signed something which we have not been able to do quite as well during the pandemic crisis, but we're going to get back to, and that's called membership. We've really made a decision as a organization, as a corporation, to ask to require every person who works at Amity to spend 2 to 4 hours a month doing something that's not your job. Interacting with students in an authentic, person-to-person way. It's not doing an extra seminar or something like that. If you're a counselor, I always use the example of, for a couple of years when I was able to do it, I was the bowling coach at Circle Tree Ranch. I took about 30 students every week for a couple hours and went bowling with them. And we had a blast. And I learned them in a different way. I was the CEO at the time. They had no idea. And it was really important for me to connect with people just person to person, and have some fun with them. All of you have things that you can do that are more role than job. And I want to encourage you, particularly as in the coming months, as we do get a handle on this pandemic, and things return. I don't think they're going to return to normal, and I don't think we're ever going to quite go back to the way we were, but we are going to come closer to it than we are today. We won't be having to wear masks. We won't have to socially distance. We'll be able to be physically affectionate with each other and actually see below the eyeballs what's going on. And as we don't have to be quite as careful about this terribly infectious virus, many of these membership activities can come back into play again. But even now, there's things we can do. You can take people out for a hike. Being outdoors is absolutely the best thing, because the chances of being infected outdoors with a good air circulation and so forth and so on is about 40 times less than being indoors in a not very well ventilated room with a whole bunch of people, So I want to encourage that. So again, the point of this video presentation is for you to get a better idea of what our expectations are for you, and for you to begin to develop a new narrative. It may be a new narrative for you in terms of, you're in the hospitality business. You're a teacher, okay? You're somebody who cares a great deal about the physical environment. You come to work enthusiastic, okay? All right? You show and demonstrate tremendous empathy, okay? Now, tremendous empathy doesn't mean that we're bleeding hearts. It's really, really important that as we interact with our students, we're honest with them, okay? We want to point out to them the behavior they need to change. And because we use a circular process for their peers to point out to them, hey, this is what you're doing that is really, really harmful to me as a person, to our community, and it's the same kind of behavior that you exhibited toward your spouse and your children, and so that kind of stuff, which is not necessarily pleasant to hear, but it's still empathetic. They came to us to learn, and part of learning is admitting that some of the things you're doing are not good, and need to change. So don't think that empathy is something where we're always being completely soft and never correct anybody and never really tell them what to do. That's not empathy. That's a really poor kind of care for people. They need guidance. They came here for guidance and to learn. And they came here primarily because what they have been doing has not been working very well for them or for anybody else connected to them. So think about this. Think about expectations. And many of you I'll see in person, and we'll go over this. And if you have questions, you can certainly, if you have questions about any of this, shoot them to the community advocates. That's Jesse and Danny, and they'll pass them on to me, and we can actually communicate back with you, or perhaps add to this videotape or make another one.